It's now 8 a.m. Hanoi time. You're with me, Hoai Leung, on VTV News, live from Hanoi. And let's first start our news bulletin for today with the headlines. Leaders pay tribute to President Ho Chi Minh in commemorations of his 126th birthday. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc urged further financial cooperation with Russia. And documentary heritage honored as memory of the world's Asia-Pacific program. A delegation of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, Government and Vietnam Fatherland Front Central Committee visited the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum in Hanoi on Thursday in commemoration of the President's 126th birthday. The delegation included Party General Secretary Nguyễn Phú Trọng, State President Trần Đại Quang, National Assembly Chairwoman Nguyễn Thị Kim Ngân, and President of the Vietnam Fatherland Front Central Committee Nguyễn Thiện Nhân, alongside many former and incumbent party and state officials. The delegation expressed their gratitude to President Ho Chi Minh, who led the nation to success in the struggle for national independence. On the same day, the delegation also laid a wreath at the Monument of the Fallen Soldiers on Bắc Sơn Street of Hanoi. The largest commemorative site for President Ho Chi Minh outside Vietnam was inaugurated on Thursday in Nha Trok Village, Muong District, in the Thailand's northeastern province of Nakhon Phanom, on the late President Ho Chi Minh's birthday on Thursday. Construction on the 12,000 square meter site began on March the 28th, 2014, and cost $1.4 million. The memorial site was built to commemorate President Ho Chi Minh's revolutionary activities in Nakhon Phanom, Thailand from 1928 to 1929 and includes numerous objects, memory, and images of Vietnamese leaders. President Ho Chi Minh's thoughts have long been considered central to the political philosophy of the Communist Party of Vietnam. One of the most important aspects of his thoughts are on national independence and sovereignty, which have been continuously implemented in the nation's struggle for freedom and development over the past 70 years. Let's hear more in the following report.
National independence in President Ho Chi Minh's philosophy cannot be given up on. This is well reflected through his saying to General Vo Nguyen Giap in July 1945, 1 month before the August Revolution. No matter how much sacrifice we have to make, even if we have to burn the entire Trường Sơn mountain range, we have to gain independence for our nation.
That thought is once again reflected in the words of President Ho Chi Minh when he met with the troops of the Pioneer Brigade at the Hung King's Temple in 1954. The Hung Kings founded the country, and we must protect it. According to President Ho Chi Minh's thoughts, we have to construct a clear borderline that is legally and internationally recognized. That's a very profound thought.
Regarding relations with other countries, President Ho Chi Minh stressed, the Vietnamese government is willing to establish diplomatic relations with any government that respects equal rights and the national sovereignty of Vietnam.
Ho Chi Minh's desire for peace and national independence also rests on his permanent willingness to make friendships with other countries, including adversaries, and his permanent readiness for negotiations.
President Ho Chi Minh's thoughts on national independence and sovereignty are said to be rounded and profound. They have guided the Communist Party of Vietnam and form the basis of dealing with international relations. These thoughts will continue to be applied in Vietnam's development in the future.
Moving on to other news, State President Trần Đại Quang received World Bank Regional Vice President for East Asia and Pacific and Country Director in Vietnam, Victoria Qua Qua, on Thursday. State President Trần Đại Quang congratulated Victoria Qua Qua on assuming her new position while meeting the World Bank official in Hanoi. The State President expressed his hope that the World Bank would continue to help Vietnam with infrastructure and renewable energy development, as well as land database and educational cooperation projects. Qua Qua said that the World Bank was willing to help Vietnam assess preferential loans to develop new renewable energy in order to mitigate the negative impact of climate change, which is part of the country's commitments at the COP21 to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc attended a business forum held in Moscow, Russia, on Wednesday during his official visit to the country. Some 500 firms attended the event, and they listened as the Prime Minister called for measures to tackle policy issues which are limiting investment and trade ties between the two countries.
Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc reiterated that Vietnam values its comprehensive strategic partnerships with Russia. However, trade turnover between the two countries dropped to $2 billion in 2015 due to the weakening of the ruble and the embargo on Russia. The number of Russian tourists to Vietnam has also fallen. The Prime Minister said recent FTAs that Vietnam participated in, including with the Eurasian Economic Union, will create favorable conditions for exports between the two countries. He asked Vietnamese and Russian firms to make efforts to raise two-way trade to $10 billion by 2020, with the help of both governments in policy making.
We need to address institutional limitations in order to achieve the set financial goals. I hope Russian governmental agencies make great efforts to employ the advantages of trade ties between the two countries in terms of products and market demand.
On the same day, Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc also attended the opening of the representative office of the Bank for Investment and Development of Vietnam in Moscow. At the event, he asked that financial banks of both countries facilitate payments with domestic currency to promote cooperation between Vietnam and other members of the Eurasian Economic Union.
U.S. President Barack Obama's coming visit to Vietnam next week is another step forward in a tightened tie between the U.S. and Vietnam. The U.S. Department of State and the National Security Council co-hosted a press conference on Thursday to discuss President Barack Obama's official visit to Vietnam on May the 23rd to the 25th. During the event, U.S. Assistant Secretary for East Asian and Pacific Affairs Daniel Russell highlighted the significance of Obama's visit to Vietnam. In his speech, Daniel Russell emphasized that the president's visit signifies substantial progress that the two countries have made in terms of relations. He stressed that a stronger bilateral relationship with Vietnam was an important factor which would benefit both nations on a whole range of issues. Representative from the U.S. National Security Council announced President Obama's official schedule, including meetings with Vietnamese leaders. Discussion will focus on measures to advance the U.S.-Vietnam comprehensive partnership across a variety of areas, such as trade, people-to-people, security, human rights, global and regional issues of mutual concerns. President Barack Obama will be the third U.S. president to pay an official visit, following President Clinton and Bush. So U.S. President Barack Obama's coming visit to Vietnam next week is another step forward to tighten ties between the U.S. and Vietnam. This is a statement made by Antony Blinken, Deputy Secretary of State, in his exclusive interview with VTV prior to the president's official visit. This is what we have to say.
Mr. Deputy Secretary, it is widely said that President Obama will mainly focus on the future of the U.S.-Vietnam relations during his trip to Vietnam. So how should we understand about that future?
Well, first, the President's very much looking forward to this visit, and I think the prospects for the relationship are incredibly strong. We built a very strong foundation in recent years, reconciling between our two countries and our two peoples, building an increasingly strong economic foundation, a foundation of security cooperation, and especially ties between our peoples. And this is an opportunity for the President to build on that foundation. And in each of these areas, I think we can show demonstrable progress.
So what are the main issues that President Obama will put on the table?
Well, if you look at the different areas where our cooperation has broadened and deepened in recent years, economic cooperation, so they'll talk about that, and other areas of economic cooperation, including major commercial deals involving some of our biggest companies like Boeing and Westinghouse and Vietnam. Security cooperation, we're doing more and more together on humanitarian assistance, on disaster relief, on maritime security, on peacekeeping. And I know that President Obama looks forward to talking about our cooperation in those areas and continuing to deepen it. And similarly with the people-to-people ties, we will soon be opening Fulbright University in Ho Chi Minh City, which will bring world-class American education to Vietnam. We very much look forward to that. And then in additional spaces too. We're cooperating increasingly not just between ourselves and not just even in the region, but globally on issues of global concern. Climate change, wildlife trafficking, global health, all of these areas.
There still remain differences in the relations between the two countries, but how do you think about the efforts by both sides to narrow such differences?
When the General Secretary was visiting the United States, visiting the Oval Office in the White House with President Obama, the President made clear that we respect the fact that we have differences. But what we've been able to do so effectively through dialogue and through building cooperation is to develop a relationship even when we have differences, and to deepen it and broaden it in many areas. There is strong support in the United States for the relationship, bipartisan support. Leaders like Secretary of State Kerry, Senator McCain, strongly support it. And the fact that over the last year, we've had the General Secretary visit the White House, and now President Obama visiting Vietnam. This is profound evidence of the strength and depth of the relationship. We're very focused on the future, but we're also not forgetting the past. We've worked hard with Vietnam to deal with war legacy issues, including, for example, dealing with unexploded ordnance, to deal with dioxin remediation, to find the remains of those who were lost, Vietnamese and Americans alike. And we'll continue that effort because it's very important that we do everything we can to deal with all the issues of the past. But the visit, the relationship, is very much focused on the future. There's a very strong foundation. We want to build on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Secretary, for joining us in this interview.
Thank you.
Resolution number 19, 2016 on major tasks and solutions to improve the business environment and national competitiveness was issued last month. The government office recently cooperated with the USAID and related agencies to implement the resolution in local regions. It is expected that the new resolution will bring positive changes and create a more favorable environment for businesses.
Business have recognized government efforts to reform administrative procedures in recent times. However, the reforms have been inconsistent, so can only be partially implemented. Therefore, the new resolution is expected to resolve the difficulties for businesses, especially related to administrative procedures.
The import of seafood or materials aim to create products with added value and enhance the value of the goods. However, the import procedures are too slow. The operations of our company are concentrated in the south, but we have to carry out the procedures in Hanoi. Resolution 19 makes some fundamental changes on inspections. Resolution 37 only mentioned normal inspections without specific regulations, so all of goods have to be inspected.
Besides enterprises, local authorities also proposed that there should be a tighter connection between the central government and local authorities. The reform process needs to be seized simultaneous implementation at national and local level.
We want to connect with related agencies to have a schedule for the implementation of Resolution 19 in local regions. This must be done to enhance the responsibility of local authorities.
Business environment indicators based on the ASEAN 4 average continue to be the target set out in the Resolution 19 2016. Many experts said that this target was ambitious but feasible with the cooperation of all parties. In the next 2 months, the ministry will amend the provisions on the specialist test in order to shorten the time for customs clearance.
Russian automobile enterprises always considered Vietnam a potential market in ASEAN. The Intergovernmental Protocol on supporting the production of motor vehicles signed in March will open up more opportunities for the cooperation of the two countries on this sector.
KAMAZ has been operating in Vietnam since 1979 and has exported 15,000 vehicles to Vietnam in that time. The enterprise has intensified its business in Vietnam in the last 15 years as it sees Vietnam as a strategic market.
Vietnam is our strategic market in Southeast Asia. We're researching into models designed especially for the Vietnam market, which meet the conditions in this country.
The recently signed protocol will reduce tax for Russian vehicles exported to Vietnam and also create preferences for Russian-Vietnamese car manufacturers. This is a chance for Russian firms such as KAMAZ or GAZ to extend their operations in Vietnam and countries in the region.
We are preparing batches of completely built cars to export to Vietnam in 2016 and batches of car parts for export in 2017. We do pay attention to tech transfer in Vietnam so that cars can be manufactured right here based on customer demand. We will further our operation in Vietnam. First, we'll foster vehicle manufacturing, increase the number of imported car models, and improve the localization rate. We also plan to target other Southeast Asian markets.
The protocol and the Eurasian Economic Union (FTA) will take effect at the same time. These agreements are expected to facilitate the trade ties between Vietnam and the EEU members of Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan.
Lychee are a dominant fruit craft of Bắc Giang province, and its importance in the local economy has been widely recognized. Recently, local authorities in the vicinity have been working together and have made commitments to boost the local consumption of lychee.
Local authorities in Bắc Giang province have affirmed that they will try to attract and strengthen connections with importers, clean food store chains, and the domestic supermarket system in order to push for the consumptions of 53,000 tons of Vietgap standard lychees at a higher price.
Bắc Giang province pledges to support local lychee growers, traders, and importers all the way through. Will act as a bridge to connect them together.
According to Vietnam Trade Promotions Agency, besides irradiations, a series of new food preservation technologies will be applied in Vietnam in order to meet the requirements of more demanding import markets. Besides the United States, Australia, South Korea, and Singapore, Vietnamese lychees are aiming for new markets such as France, Britain, and the UAE.
Currently, we're applying the sulfur smoking technology that European countries use to preserve imported lychees from Madagascar. It's fortunate that our lychee season is right after the Madagascar lychee season.
Besides the promise to facilitate easier transportation routes for lychees from the local police and traffic departments, the Customs Department also wishes to offer support.
Because lychees naturally spoil rather early, we have and negotiate with our counterparts in China to prolong the opening hours of border gates.
With all these commitments from local authorities, lychees growers in Bắc Giang province can be optimistic about the prospects of abundant future harvests.
Still to come on VTV News, voters in some remote localities in the border and island region cast their ballots on Thursday, 3 days before the election on Sunday. And 2 pieces of Vietnamese documentary heritage were honored as memory of the world's Asia-Pacific program.
Exotic Vietnam is an intriguing blend of many charms. This land is where all manner of stunning landscapes await like a visual feast, rivaled only by the beauty of its people and their abundantly rich tradition and culture. Here is where you can relive the past in richest color or live it up in the bright lights of the big city. With so much more to offer, Vietnam is simply unforgettable.
Welcome back to VTV News, live from Hanoi. Voters in some remote localities in the border and island region cast their ballots on Thursday, 3 days before the election on Sunday. Nearly 12,000 voters at the 49 polling stations of 11 border communes in 3 districts of Quảng Nam province, including Nam Giang, Tây Giang, and Thăng Bình, and 1 island commune in Hội An City, joined early voting for the 14th National Assembly and all levels people's councils. Turnout was up on previous elections. Also on Thursday, voters in Thổ Châu Commune, Phu Quoc District, also voted early. This was the only commune in the southern province of Kiên Giang allowed to organize an early election. The commune has 5 polling stations, catering for around 1,800 voters. Many voted early. An international conference on maritime boundaries and the law of the sea opened on Thursday in Dili, the capital of Timor-Leste. The conference was organized to raise awareness about the maritime laws and the role of international tribunals, as well as to discuss issues related to current maritime disputes. Attending the event are many scholars from ASEAN region and other countries such as Russia and England.
In his opening speech, Timor-Leste Prime Minister emphasized the importance of maritime law as well as the role of International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in establishing a framework to determine maritime rights and sea borders between countries. Concurring with Timor-Leste's Prime Minister, scholars at the morning session said that should all countries adhere to international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, in 1982, the security and peace of the Asia-Pacific region and the world in general would be ensured.
There have been many disputes that have been resolved according to UNCLOS. In Asia alone, there were at least 8 cases of unilateral submitted disputes getting final resolution. Therefore, I think conventions such as UNCLOS have played a very important role in recent years in settling cross-country maritime disputes.
This year, the Dili International Conference on Maritime Boundaries and the Law of the Sea was organized to mark the 20th anniversary of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. Overall, the conference aims to promote compliance with international laws and strengthen international cooperation in solving maritime disputes.
Now here's an update on the 18 Vietnamese fishermen arrested in the Philippines. According to Vietnam's ambassador to the Philippines, Trương Chiêu Dương, the embassy is doing its utmost to negotiate with the Filipino authorities to provide sufficient accommodation to ensure the fishermen's well-being, as well as measures to reduce their penalties and attain the release of the fishermen. Ambassador Dương has also mentioned stricter penalties this time from the Philippines side, which could include large fines. Earlier on May the 12th, 3 fishing vessels carrying 18 Vietnamese fishermen were arrested by the Philippine Coast Guard off the coast of Calayan Island in Filipino territorial waters. When detained, all 3 vessels were found to contain tuna. All 3 fishing vessels have been identified as coming from Bình Định province. All the fishermen and their fishing vessels are being held at the Port Irini in Cagayan province of Philippines. Now, 2 pieces of Vietnamese documentary heritage were honored at memory of the World's Asia-Pacific program. The items include poems carved on the Huế royal architecture and wood blocks found in Phúc Giang School in Hà Tĩnh. These 2 items were recognized for having met key criteria such as authenticity, identity and the origin of documentary, the uniqueness, the significance to the country, region and the world, and met UNESCO's educational criteria. Poetry carved on the Huế royal architecture consists of nearly 2,700 words by the Nguyen dynasty emperors from the early 19th to the mid-20th century. Wood blocks found at Phúc Giang School are documentary heritage of the Nguyễn Huy clan from the Hà Tĩnh province that were handed down since 1758. Vietnam has had 6 pieces of documentary heritages honored. Illegal poaching has significantly reduced the population of wild elephants in Vietnam's Central Highlands, where the animal has long been considered an important cultural symbol. Local authorities have implemented various measures to combat this situation. Let's find out what these measures are in the following report.
This elephant, named Junes, was rescued by Đắk Lắk Elephant Conservation Center last year after being trapped in the forest. One of Junes' legs and his trunk were seriously injured when the center staff found him. Thanks to the center's medical care, Junes has now recovered. Junes' case is an example of how the prompt rescues of wild elephants trapped in the forest can be a way of preserving the elephant populations.
Elephants are an endangered species in urgent need of protection. Every day the center's rangers are sent into the forest to look for trapped elephants. We want to do everything we can to protect the wild elephants here in the province and provide them with an ideal habitat to grow.
Another measure being carried out is to encourage every local to act as rangers and report illegal poachers and perform first aid on any injured elephants found near residential areas. With these measures, it is expected that illegal poachings will soon be prevented and wild elephants can again freely roam in the Central Highlands, their so-called sacred land.
57 watercolor paintings of Huế Citadel went on display at the Imperial City in Huế City, the central province of Thừa Thiên Huế, on Thursday morning. The exhibition showcased paintings from a 4-day painting event that depicts Huế architecture and landscapes from the perspectives of 29 painters from Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and China. The painting event was organized by the International Watercolor Society from May the 15th to the 18th. The event has helped promote the city's art scenes and provided an opportunity for local and overseas artists to meet and exchange ideas. And finally, as always, is the updated weather forecast. And that's it for this hour. Do log on to vtv4.vn or youtube.com/vtv4go for more updated news. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back at 3 p.m. Hanoi time, live on VTV International.